Hello and welcome to another episode of Thick Slices and Deep Cuts. Today's episode is a first of sorts. It's technically a first. I will be ranking an ambient artist from the Cryo Chamber label for the first time. And that artist is Godbody Disconnect. My sort of unofficial rule is that in order to rank an artist, there have to be at least 5 albums to do what I would say is a pretty legitimate ranking. And a lot of the artists are close. They've got 3, they've got 4, whatever the case may be. In this case, Godbody Disconnect just released his 5th album earlier this year in the spring. So I was, knowing that was coming out, and now that it has been out and I've had a chance to listen to it, I knew I was going to finally do an artist ranking from the Cryo Chamber label. I think in the past I've done some Cryo Chamber stuff. I did, one of the first episodes I ever did on this channel was to just sort of showcase the label and some of the different artists and just anything that I owned at that time and what I considered the top 5 artists to be. And he was one of the top 5 at that time as well. And then I did do, we did sort of do a tribute to Mount Shrine where we pretty much broke his catalog down. That was almost 2 months ago when he unfortunately passed, but we did kind of break his stuff down. And then in my year in review of 2020, Godbody Disconnect made my top 10 for the year, along with a couple of other, another Mount Shrine and Alpha Zone album, as well as some honorable mentions. So, and if you watch some of the other the pizza ones with my daughter, just stuff that I've been buying recently, you'll see new releases from Cryo Chamber make it in here. So they get some love and support on the station for sure. But anyway, enough about that. Getting into the review. So we have 5 albums here. Godbody Disconnect is basically, and I hope I'm pronouncing his name right, Bruce Moallem. I think he's in New Jersey, somewhere in the Northeast. I believe he used to be a drummer in a grindcore death metal band as well, so that's kind of cool. I myself I came from that sort of lineage too in the beginning. But so 5 albums, nearly impossible to differentiate one from 5. Almost impossible. I think when you've got more rock-based music, it's sometimes easier to go, well, this album or that era is better or worse than this, or I liked when they were doing this more than the productions on here. But these albums are all so, they're similar in quality. They may be different in tone, but they're very similar in quality. There's almost nothing separating my number 1 from my number 5. And in fact, if you're wanting to know where to start with Godbody Disconnect, I would say just start anywhere. Just pick anything and go. Put the entire catalog on shuffle and just let it play. So we'll just get right into it. Again, the music here, typical classic dark, deep, ambient, cinematic, textured, the field recordings, even early on, this cool, iconic spoken word or spoken voice thing. So we'll get right into it. So I guess something has to come in at number 5. So for me, coming in at number 5 is an excellent album, and I'll try to explain why it's at number 5. But at number 5, I have the 4th album from 2020. I have The Depths of Finality. Now this album is excellent, and it was my number 10 album from 2020. So I really enjoy this album very much. This is the first album where the project is starting to go more, I guess it's always been ethereal, but there's no spoken word on here. This is the first time where you're not getting any of the spoken word. That is gone here. It doesn't mean you don't get some field recordings or what sounds like maybe a voice here and there kind of, muffled or manipulated or slowed down or played backwards, but there's no official spoken word. But this album is really good. It's really meditative. This album may not be quite as obviously dark as some of the others, but it's really good. I Can Feel Who You Were. It's great, haunting but beautiful. Dreaming Between the Trees. I think we'll hear that at some point if this podcast goes long enough. This is also holds the unusual place in that it's the only album of the 5 that all of the albums have 7 tracks, with the exception of this one. This one actually has 8, but it is also the shortest album at 43 minutes. So you've got an extra track, but you've got the shortest album. And so, therefore, you've got sort of God Body Disconnect in a shorter format. I mean, these songs are still pretty typical, 6 minutes, 6 minutes, 5 minutes, 5, 7, 5. But you've got a 3-minute one, you've got a 4-minute one, So you've got a few shorter tracks here, but I think this is excellent. And again, I'm only bringing that up because I'm trying to figure out how to rank these albums that are all equal. So, I mean, that may sound silly, but I'm like, well, I don't know. It's the shortest album. But beautiful artwork, by the way. That is Eric Oswald, a.k.a. Kios. I don't know if you can see it on the glare, but the trees in that guy's face, and inside of his face and through the glasses, you can see the surgeons working on someone. It's certainly about, once again, mortality. Facing death, facing mortality. But very powerful stuff. His stuff is always powerful. This one may not be as obvious. It's a little more subtle than some of his other work, but I think it's still a great album, great cover. And again, something had to come in at number 5. So I struggled with, I kind of knew what my number 1 was, and I kind of knew what my number 2 was. And not that those were even his best albums, just sentimentally my favorites. But when it came to ranking 3, 4, and 5, I'm like, how am I gonna, do I just draw names out of a hat and do it that way? So there you go, at number 5, his 4th album from 2020, The Depths of Finality. All right. Okay. Moving on, another excellent choice, and this is why I waited a little while to do this review, because I wanted to get more and more familiar with this. But at number 4, I have the most recent album that just came out probably a couple of months ago here in 2021, The Wanderer's Dream. This one is great. It's much, again, this is the second album now without any of the spoken word. It's a different direction. You can read what Bruce had to say on the Bandcamp page about this album and about, just trying to, sometimes people go down, they're in a dark place in life, or they're going down a dark path and they're trying to get things corrected. And so this is sort of, I feel like this is another one of these good meditative, healing, maybe a little closer to some sort of spirituality, but here are the titles. The Heart Unfolds, Dreaming of My Former Self, The Road That Repeats, Beckoning Me to Cross Over, An Emptiness That Persists, The Ghosts That Dwell Within, and Who I Was is Who Is Not Who I'll Become, which I don't know if you can hear his voice here.
But I guess the real truth is, maybe I was afraid to live.
I don't know if you can hear that or not, but his spoken word on the early albums is very iconic.
Now you see, I don't know where I'll go from here.
But yeah, this is an excellent album. I wanted to rank this higher.
What I do know is,
I think I kind of tended to put the newer stuff lower. I'm not sure why. I do enjoy this album very much.
Is that there's always going to be some kind of
and it's maybe not. It's not as. These last two albums are kind of dark and sad, but they're not nearly as dark as the earlier albums. And I think that's part of where he is in life right now, where he's trying to get away from some of that ultra darkness. But what this doesn't have when it comes to terms of bleak black darkness, it has in this really deep, just this like lush production. So he's kind of moving away from that into a deeper, more lush thing. But you know what? He's always had that element too. So. But there you go, just an excellent album. I wanted to do this review probably a month ago, but I hadn't listened to this enough. I knew that I enjoyed, that final track, Who I Was Is Not Who I'll Become. That definitely stood out immediately, and it all sounded good, but I didn't know what it meant in the context of the other albums. But this is an excellent album. So there you go, kind of the second in this new sort of phase that he's in. That started here. It actually kind of started right before this, but it's definitely starting here. But coming in at number 4, his 5th and most recent album here from 2021, The Wanderer's Dream. Okay. Here we go. Classic. So coming in at number 3, we're going to go back to 2016. We're going to go to the debut album, Dredge Portals. This is where it all began. This is a storyline that continues on to the next album, but it's about someone who's sounds like they're shot and murdered in the street. They're shot in the street. Well, their body's dead, but their mind is still alive. So it's like when you're in the hospital and nobody will pull the plug. You're basically gone, but since they won't pull the plug, you're trapped. So he's trapped. I want to say he was trapped here for several years, maybe 7. I could be wrong on that, but it sounds like he's just sitting there waiting. He's listening to everyone around him living, and he can't get on to where he needs to go next. But I mean, just so many iconic songs. At first, I had this ranked last because it was his first work, and maybe his techniques and sound have gotten better over the years, but I just think everything on here is memorable and iconic. I think Rise of the Dormant Host, I mean, you've got his classic spoken word, and he's narrating, and I think you can hear him narrate at different times, I think 3 different times on this album. Plus, this album's pretty long. It's 50 some odd minutes, so it's a longer one. Descend with Demons, Lost in the Astral World is incredible. Dreaming of Glaciers, Perpetually Devoured. I mean, there are just iconic, memorable melodies on this. So it was just, when I was listening to all these again, I just was like, I can't rank it 4th or 5th, or I can't rank it at the bottom. It's just too. It's a very defining album from him. It defines the sound right here. Right here, you've got God Body Disconnect sound pretty much defined. Has he fine-tuned it and enhanced it over the next 4 albums? Yeah. But it's classic, it's very memorable, and maybe it's just my bias, but sometimes I'm one of those guys, you kind of gravitate towards those early albums in some artist's career, like those are the classic ones. Maybe that's what's going on here, because I know the last 2 are great, and yet I have the most recent 2 at 5 and 4, but so there you go, just another classic album, a lot darker. So the thing I also like about this and why it's ranked 3rd is it is deep and lush and kind of meditative, but it's got these memorable melodies that just jump out at you. So it's more immediate, it's easier to go, it's more easy to get into. And it's also got the spoken word, which I think makes it more memorable as well. But it's also got these moments of just complete darkness, bleak blackness, where there is no melody. It's just complete dark ambience. But then they always morph. They go from that bleakness, and then somehow, some way, you don't know how it happens, but next thing you know, you're on this really this very ear candy-ish, lush ride within the same song. A song that starts off just completely dark and bleak, just you end up somewhere else that's so much more incredible than where the song started. And I think that's going on here on the first album as well. So I always like the range of things that goes on these earlier albums. So there you go. At number 3, the debut from 2016, I have Dredge Portals. Okay, coming in at number 2, I was pretty sure this was my number 2. I toyed with it being the number 1, but I knew that these top 2 were going to be the top 2. So at number 2, the second album from 2017, I have Sleeper's Fate. I love this album. And in fact, when I said just start anywhere with the God Body Disconnect catalog, and I mean that, but if somebody said, no, give me one album, well, all right, go to Sleeper's Fate. I think anything and everything that God Body Disconnect has to offer, you can probably find on this album. Again, you've got awesome, cool, creepy spoken word. I think it happens 2 or 3 times on this album as well. At least, I think 3 times on this album. It continues the story from Dredge Portals. This time he's still in his, I guess you call it a coma, for 8 years, waiting for somebody to pull the plug so he can get on with his soul's journey. But, it just opens up once again with classic, creepy cinematic field recordings, just like Dredge Portals. Creepy cinematic field recordings, the spoken word, and then it just goes into a cool dark track that gets has a nice build up towards the end. Halls of Disintegration. Again, these songs are all dark and yet melodic too. They really do that good job of being bleak and lush and having all that cool cinematic atmosphere. Reservoir Dreamer, Lair of the Dormant Host. We heard Drowning with God to start, one of my favorite songs he ever did. Flush of a Ghost, The Portals Evolve is melodic. The album ends very melodically. By the way, this song we're hearing is from the new one, The Wanderer's Dream. I love the new stuff. But yeah, this album is incredible. It just showcases this big range. I think the first two albums, even though I ranked Dredge Portals 3 and Sleeper's Fate 2, I think the first two albums have the biggest, the widest range of ideas. You've got that spoken word, you've got that cinematic quality, you've got that bleakness, that blackness, and that darkness, but you've still got that lush melodic thing going on too. The more recent albums just really tap in and perfect that lush depth, and I love that too. And I'll talk more about that here in a moment. But certainly on the new stuff, sounds great. But there you go, just an incredible album. This was the first thing I ever heard from God Body Disconnect. I got into the label, I think it was February of 18, because I just remember Ager Sonis's album Necropolis was the one that was either out or about to be released. And I just stumbled upon this label and found out all about it, and just started diving into all the albums from early 18 and 2017 and maybe 2016, and this was one of them. So there you go. At number 2, absolute classic. I don't know what's considered his most popular at all, but I might venture to guess this one is the big one. But number 2 from 2017, his second album, Sleeper's Fate. And so last but not least, there can only be one. I don't know if this is anyone else's number 1. This is just the one that I really reach for always. At number 1 from 2019, his third album, the middle album of the catalog, The Mist Between Mirrors. This literally, as the third of 5 albums, is literally, it's the bridge between those 2 early dark albums and where he is now. It's got one piece of spoken word, just a brief moment of cinematic atmosphere at the beginning for Grief of the Living. It's no longer continuing that storyline from the first 2, but still dealing with this mortality and those themes. But instead of being super dark on this one, everything is just powerful. It's just melodic and powerful, and just got that lush ear candy. And even the sad stuff is heavy and melodic. And so the things that you hear on the Depths of Finality and certainly on the Wanderer's Dream, you can start to hear them take root right here. So I just think this is the best of both worlds. You've still got just hints of the classic early era of those first 2 albums, and you've certainly got, if you like what he's doing lately, you're gonna like this. So I just think it blends. It's just the bridge album of everything so far. Blinding Years is great. The Longer I Dream, the more disconnected I become. Where Our Ghosts Disappear. The Existence of Stars. We heard Old Feelings Always Return. I love that. It's a shorter song in 5 minutes, but man, it's so good. Another Lullaby from the Abyss. I don't know if he had a woman sing a vocal melody for his recording, or if he just found a vocal melody of a recording and placed it in over some of his eerie stuff, but that's kind of a cool, dark, dreamy kind of sequence too. So, but yeah, just a big fan of this album. This is what really, Sleeper's Fate, then I got this, loved it so much, went back and got Dredge Portals, and then basically was waiting. Basically was then waiting for the Depths of Finality, was waiting for the Wanderer's Dream at that point. So there you go. Number 1, the third album from 2019, The Mist Between Mirrors. So that is ranking the 5 albums of God Body Disconnect. Real quick to recap, at number 5 I have the 4th album from 2020, The Depths of Finality. Number 4, the 5th album from this year, from 2021, I have The Wanderer's Dream. Number 3, the debut album from 2016, Dredge Portals. Number 2, the second album from 2017, Sleeper's Fate. And at number 1, the third album from 2019, The Mist Between Mirrors. A couple other things he did. This was, I believe, back in 2016, shortly after he released his first album. He had a track on this cool, I guess it was a collaboration. I mean, everybody did their own track, but this album called Locus Arcadia. So I'm not sure about the entire storyline, but it's science fiction, deep space science fiction, I guess. The Locus Arcadia, I guess, is a spaceship. Something happened. They lost signal with the people on the ship. So the character or characters in this have to go out to the ship and see what happened. So it's very creepy and ominous. And I love movies like that. I wish they would make more movies like this. So just the subject matter concept behind this, I'm already vastly intrigued. But so he has the last track on here, 15 and a half minutes. It's called A Prisoner's Sacrifice Facing Arcadia. By the way, City's Last Broadcast is on here, I think, right? Wait, no, Randall Collier Ford, Flowers for Body Snatchers, and Council of Nine. And all these tracks are 11, 17, 14, and then God Body Disconnects is 15 and a half minutes. And what I like about this track is 15 and a half minutes, the first 10 minutes, he's using science fiction sound effects and things. It's God Body Disconnect doing something completely un-God Body Disconnect like. So, which is cool. So you get this completely different look at his skill set, basically. And he's doing this cool dark science fiction, deep space thing. But then about, I guess I'll say 2/3 of the way through, so maybe after about 10 minutes, it breaks into his classic lush, melodic way to end this whole entire album that's about an hour long. So it's a really cool song, and it's 15 and a half minutes. So you're not just getting like 1 6-minute track, you're getting 15 and a half minutes. So if you're a fan of God Body Disconnect and are curious about all of the things he's done, I would suggest checking out that title and checking out this album in its entirety. It's a very cool album. Also, had this on vinyl. So Miles to Midnight, featuring Atrium Carcieri, City's Last Broadcast, and God Body Disconnect. But what I like about this is, I told you that Bruce was a drummer in a death metal band. Well, he's providing these noir jazz, these really in the background, kind of quiet, these noir jazz drum beats all over this. And apparently he also provided sort of the bedrock of atmospheric keys for this. And so then City's Last Broadcast kind of puts his creepy tape loops and things over that. And then Atrium Carcieri puts his creepy old piano sounds over that as well. But a lot of the basis of this, the noir jazzy drums and the basic structures are coming from God Body Disconnect. And this album is awesome. It's just creepy. I mean, that cover says it, like 1939, 1940, film noir, dark, some David Lynch movie. Just an awesome, awesome vibe of an album. I love this. So that's another thing that he's heavily involved in that I think, if you're into God Body Disconnect's 5 albums, definitely check. He's all over. His fingerprints are all over this, and he's got a huge chunk of a song on this as well. So those are some other things. I know he collaborated and contributed somewhere on Nyarlathotep. If somebody, man, it would be great if somebody could give a list of who plays what minutes where on what discs, because I have no idea who's playing what where. But he's somewhere on one of these 3 discs. He's somewhere on one of these 2, Yog Sothoth. He is somewhere on Shub Nigoroth. He's somewhere on Hastur. And he's somewhere on this brand new one I've only listened to, I think, twice now, but it's Yig. Love these books. Great stuff. It's all the H.P. Lovecraft characters. So if anybody can provide who plays what when on these things, that would be great. But he's somewhere on these. He's contributed there. He's done these 5 excellent albums, and I think these are certainly of note as well as the Locus Arcadia and Miles to Midnight albums as well. So there you have it. That is an overview. That is ranking the 5 albums of God Body Disconnect and a little bit of the an overview of the other work he's done for the Cryo Chamber label. So that does it. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.